Welcome to Vegetarian in the Age of Global Consciousness. I'm Francis Levy, and Ed Nersessian and I are co-directors of the Philip Tatey Center. Before we continue with this afternoon's greatly awaited program on vegetarianism, I want to make a couple of announcements because it's the end of our season, and we have one more roundtable coming up next Saturday. Before I do that, though, take a look at the exhibit on the walls. As I've said many times before, these exhibits are not gratuitous acts, but relate to roundtables that we have. And this one is called Hive, Web, and Mind. And see, if you look back there, there's an actual hive up there. There's actually a hive out there too, outside also. And there's, you see, I didn't even notice the one behind me. And I'm having an anaphylactic reaction. So help me, somebody. But anyway, so take a look at it, because the idea of this, on the first we had this wonderful panel on social networking that was moderated by David Kirkpatrick, who wrote the book, The Facebook Effect, which you may be hearing a lot about now. We had Sean Parker, who was one of the founders of Facebook here. It's a really fascinating panel. And this exhibit was related to that panel to the extent that it deals with both organic and inorganic networks. So if you can, afterwards, just try to get closer to the works and take a look at them, because these are rather extraordinary. Parallel universes, the history of an idea, features also an impressive lineup of thinkers. We have Krista Davis Akampora, from professor of philosophy at NYU, who will deal with Nietzsche's doctrine of eternal recurrence. Eva Brand is coming back, a mathematician from St. John's College, and she will deal with Poincaré's recurrence theorem. David Weinberg, the cosmologist and project scientist of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, will deal with parallel universes from the point of view of astrophysics and cosmology. Paul Park, those of you who know science fiction, he's a renowned science fiction writer, is coming down to talk about the representations of parallel universes in science fiction. And lastly, David Morgan from the New School will actually deal with parallel universes from a history of science perspective. So it's a fascinating panel. It exemplifies the Philip Tatey's, some of the methodology we use here in bringing people from varying disciplines to discuss a kind of way of encapsulating human thinking. And that idea of parallel universes has occurred since the pre-Socratics, actually. And now it takes actual form, and string theoreticians talk about it. And so it's something which is, a rather interesting Philip Tateyan project. Our Summer Chamber Film Festival will be continuing, and I want to tentatively say that we'll be doing the films of Jean Renoir. We have to confirm this, but we'll do, those would be famous films of Jean Renoir: Bout d'Orsay from Drowning, early film, Grand Illusion, and Règle du jeu, the rules of the game. So should be exciting this summer. And that will be confirmed. You have to go to our site, philiptateys.org, check our calendar, and check our calendar for all activities. This event will be in past programming on the Philip Tatey site, as all events are, in about 4 days. It's also on YouTube. So without further ado, also, I'll just say this: give us any money you can. We want money. We need money. We're surviving on a month-to-month basis. We've gotten incredible. The money that you give enables us to apply for the grants, and we're getting them. We've got New York State Council on the Arts, Department of Cultural Affairs. They like us. But we need the money to survive until the grants come through, and the grants don't pay for. The grants pay for specific programs, but they don't pay for things like rent. So we need your help. Without further ado, let me introduce Benjamin Sachs. Ben Sachs is an assistant professor and faculty fellow in the program of Environmental Studies and Center for Bioethics at New York University. Before coming to NYU, he was a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Bioethics in the National Institutes of Health. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you, you're going to introduce everybody else, okay?
Yeah.
You're also good at that. Trained as a philosopher, Dr. Sachs' teaching focuses on animal, USC, and other issues in environmental ethics. His articles appear in the Kennedy Institute of Ethics Journal, Bioethics, the American Journal of Bioethics, and other journals. Professor Sachs will moderate this afternoon's panel and introduce our other distinguished guests. So take it away, Ben.
All right, thanks. And thanks to the Philip Tatey Institute for letting me be here. This is really exciting.
Proud to have you.
So I'll start to my left. Ronald Stram founded the Center for Integrative Health and Healing. He completed a 2-year fellowship program in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona with Dr. Andrew Weil before establishing the center near his hometown of Albany. A graduate of Mount Sinai School of Medicine, he did his residency in emergency medicine at Albany Medical Center. He has been a regional director of emergency medicine at hospitals throughout the Northeast. Okay, moving along. This is Andrew Smith. He's a writer and lecturer on food and culinary history. He serves as the editor for Reaction Books Edible Series and teaches culinary history and food writing courses at the New School University. He is author of 17 books and numerous articles in both scholarly and popular journals. Smith has delivered over 1,500 presentations at regional, national, and international conferences and has frequently been interviewed for publications, radio, and television as a consultant on culinary history. Next, Nils Norén is Vice President of Culinary and Pastry Arts at the French Culinary Institute and the Italian Culinary Academy, both of which are located in New York City's International Culinary Center. Prior to his role at the French Culinary Institute, Norén was the executive chef at New York's world-famous Aquavit, where for 10 years he brought Scandinavian cuisine to the forefront of modern cooking. Before arriving in the US, Norén made a name for himself in his native Sweden as a chef at 2 of Stockholm's Michelin-starred restaurants and served as the educational coordinator at Restaurant Akademin. Along with Dave Arnold, Norén writes the blog cookingissues.com, covering everything from rotovaps to scoling. I'm sure I butchered some of that. Sorry. And finally, Gary Null.
Great food, by the way. He did our benefit last year. Unbelievable cook. Unbelievable food.
Gary Null has been one of the foremost advocates of alternative medicine and natural healing for over 3 decades. An award-winning journalist and New York Times best-selling author, Dr. Null has written over 70 books on nutrition, self-empowerment, and public health issues, including his most recent, Power Aging. His syndicated public radio show, Natural Living with Gary Null, earned 21 Silver Microphone Awards and is the longest-running continually aired health program in America at 27 years. The Gary Null Show, which can be heard on the internet at www.prncom.net, is an on-air health forum featuring knowledgeable guests and scientific information that is presented objectively and in layperson's terms. So that's our panel for today. So obviously it's a diverse array of people here. We have a chef, a nutritionist, a historian, a doctor, a philosopher. So by the end of today, you should all know what meat eating does to your taste buds, your health, your social status, and your soul. So first of all, just to...
Got it. Worried down.
So having good, intelligent discussions about anything, we have to be clear about our terms, so I figured maybe the first thing to do would be to talk about what vegetarianism means. But unfortunately, there isn't just one accepted definition. So I'll just run through a few of the things that it might mean to some people. So for some people, vegetarianism is a refusal to eat animal flesh. Now, there are variations on this. Some people actually only refuse to eat like mammal flesh, cows, pigs. So they would eat fish, for instance. And some people wouldn't eat, say, chickens or fish, but they would eat insects. So for some people, it's a refusal to eat sort of higher animal flesh. For some people, vegetarianism is a refusal to eat the flesh of raised animals. So it's an aversion to sort of animal agriculture. So hunting is okay. If you kill something, you can eat it. Or roadkill would be okay. I don't know if people actually do eat roadkill anymore, but...
What's roadkill?
You haven't been to West Virginia.
Tastes great.
Good point. And for some people, vegetarianism is just a blanket refusal to eat animal products. So not only flesh, but eggs and milk would be included in the prohibition. So that's some ways in which the term is used, and we should try to be clear on which we're talking about as we move forward. And people have varying reasons for being vegetarian. And I won't run through them all. There are animal welfare, animal rights reasons, environmental concerns, health concerns, and plenty more, religious, economical, the list goes on. So what's the status quo of vegetarianism? Well, A 2003 Vegetarian Resource Group Harris Interactive Survey revealed that 2.8% of the respondents anyway, said that they never eat meat. That means all animal flesh. And that's about 5.7 million people. Now, it's a poll that was run by the Vegetarian Resource Group, so maybe it's not the most reliable number, but it's a number. It's better to have something to think about. Vegetarianism seems to be most prevalent among 25 to 34-year-olds, and the evidence, and that's a pretty young group, and the evidence seems to indicate that vegetarianism is on the rise, at least in the United States. So I guess the question that I'd like to start off with is probably the most general question, and maybe therefore the most difficult one to answer, but is this a good thing? Should we be glad that vegetarianism appears to be on the rise?
Well, if I'll answer this in terms of a medical point of view. I mean, certainly when you look at diets sort of internationally and nationally, those people that espouse to a vegetarian-like diet, whether it's I eat meat once a month or once every other month, but mostly eat a vegetarian diet, it looks like that cancer rates are down, heart disease is down, Alzheimer's is down, better in terms of just gut issues. Their GI tract tends to run better. And so if you look at it in terms of a medical standpoint, it seems to be a better avenue of which we should eat by.
Do you mean no flesh at all, including fish? Or?
Well, I mean, there are different, just like we were saying, there are certain issues with vegetarianism that have potential of making us nutritionally deficient. One of those specifically is omega-3 fatty acids. And that is, somewhat of an issue because on a plant source you can get alpha-linoleic acid from flax oil or canola, but the conversion rate for alpha-linoleic acid to DHA, which is one of the omega-3 fatty acids, is pretty much very unusual. The EPA, which is eicosanoic pentanoic acid, is maybe a little bit better, but you need a lot of it. And if we look at really what the risk reduction is, it's in omega-3s. And so in that sense, that's one of the areas that you can become deficient in. B12 is another area where you can become deficient in, and therefore you tend to have supplementation to cover that. There are other components, and we don't need to list them all now, but certainly that's one of the reasons why potentially not having a completely vegetarian diet, or at least being very aware of the potential deficiencies, is important.
I'd like to respond to your issue. I'm not a vegetarian, but I think what comes out of the vegetarian movement's been fantastic. It's been lots of issues that have been raised that the rest of us should have been concerned with for a long time and haven't been, dealing with animal rights, dealing with factory farms, dealing with a whole series of other issues which we're going to be discussing. But I think those are the issues that vegetarians raise, and they're fantastic issues that we should be talking about.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that too. I mean, I'm, my primary thing is not to deal with nutrition and things. I deal with flavor and taste. So, but the vegetarian movement, which has been fantastic because it actually means that we have better vegetables. If you go back to the 70s, all the vegetables we had were terrible. You had tomatoes in the winter, it tastes nothing. So if anything, we have actually gotten a lot better food through the movement, and I think that's fantastic. Then on the other hand, we're talking about some of the nutrition issues. There's also better, even if a big part, no, I'm not a vegetarian, and I probably never will be, but I think what it brings, though, is it brings a more balanced diet, because all of a sudden you have great products to work with, so you don't feel the need to eat these huge portions of beef, protein, whatever it is. So I think it has a lot of great things with it, even though, again, I probably never turn a vegetarian, but I'm really happy about some of the things that I've brought.
Gary, we already heard one person suggesting that the vegetarian diet seems to have some health benefits. Do you agree with that?
You have to be very specific. Most of the young people today who are vegetarians are malnourished. You will have teenagers eating a pizza and they are happy that they're not killing an animal. That's good. But then they're wearing leather. That's not. I'm a vegan. I eat nothing but a heartbeat or a face. I've been a vegan for 55 years. I've had vegan restaurants. The first gourmet vegetarian restaurant in 1972, and our vegetables were great.
Yeah, no, I just mean in general.
You're from Sweden?
Yeah.
You can be forgiven. We had a larger vegetarian movement of higher consciousness in the 70s than we do today. We had a back to the farm movement. It was the beginning of the feminist movement. It was highlighting the long struggle in the civil rights movement. It was a consciousness. What we're lacking today is context. Everybody's got an opinion. Few of them are used in a context that shows the whole picture. One friend called yesterday and said, I'm not feeling good today. I had some French fries. And I said, why did you have the French fries? Why? Well, I wanted them. Okay, you wanted them. Cause and effect. Epigenetics, the new field of medicine that will virtually antiquate everything in holistic medicine today. When you ate the French fry, you could only eat that French fry in the context of the McDonald's you went in. The people don't go into McDonald's to buy French fries, they go in to buy hamburgers. You're now epigenetically connecting to an act that caused the rainforest in the southern hemisphere of Brazil to be completely eliminated at over 5,000 hectares per hour, so the genetically engineered soy from Monsanto can be planted to raise the food that will go into those cattle. The cattle are factory farmed. The indigenous cultures there have been physically removed without rights. Then the air patterns of the cloud formations from the precipitate matter that goes up from the plants that were holding the carbon and hence lowering global pollution and global warming are no longer there to trap that. One tree holds 22,000 gallons of water. One tree. Now you've eliminated that. Now instead of having clouds come up over the Amazon and go to other parts to fall down on Georgia and Alabama and Texas, you just finished the longest sustained drought in Texas history, 10 years and 7 months. It was only this year they had some rain. Devastation on an unparalleled level there. And you had your French fry. Your
Wow. That's a heavy dose of French fries.
So understand that I have to look at context. So someone who is a vegetarian for ethical reasons, good. For hygienic reasons, for health reasons. The number one nutrient that people are deficient in when they eat a vegan diet is carnosine. Carnosine cannot be obtained. And carnosine is the one nutrient that is important for slowing glycation. Glycation, visualize when a person puts a chicken plump and moist into an oven and takes out 2 hours later, it's crisp and brown. That's called glycation, where you chemically alter proteins and sugars. That glycation is what causes us to age prematurely. There is no disease natural to the aging process. Not Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, arthritis, heart disease. No disease is actually, and that's my specialty, I'm a PhD also in human nutrition and public health science, Professor Fairleigh Dickinson, and a research fellow at the Institute of Applied Biology for 30 years in anti-aging medicine. When you give carnosine, you actually help protect the telomeres that are on the end caps of chromosomes, so you slow down aging. What speeds up aging? The average American diet. Everything that this good doctor here, hopefully the chef here, would advocate, taking in the foods and nutrients that will slow down the aging process. When you slow down the aging process, you slow down the diseases of inflammation that come from that. Heart disease, cancer, arthritis, fibromyalgia, macular degeneration, cataracts, dementia. All of these are inflammatory based. When you're eating on the vegan diet or the Mediterranean diet or the Portugal diet or the Okinawan diet, you're eating a diet that has more of the nutrients that are known and antioxidants to slow the aging process. If you talk about vegetarianism in the context of what it means, vegetarianism comes from the Greek, it means to enliven. It doesn't mean protein. It doesn't mean vegetable. So if I consciously choose to take something into my body that is enlivening me, and then I am looking at the literature and saying, I'm going to be B12 deficient. Vegans are, unless they supplement. But with the macrobiotics against supplementation, they're very sickly. When a lot of raw foodists don't realize that a 100% raw food diet, though it floods the body with enzymes, is too much fiber. We get into these fads. Even
so what's the bottom line? Is about veganism?
You must be conscious of every aspect, and whatever aspect you're not conscious of becomes your weak link. It isn't a weak link, so you really shouldn't try to become a vegan until you first do your homework and know what it is to do it. Otherwise, it's like trying to start running across the Mojave Desert without a backpack of water in it. I see a lot of people make the mistake of thinking just by giving up on animal proteins, they're doing a good thing. That is certainly more noble, but it's like organic. Organic is meaningless today. Meaningless. Because organic doesn't mean that it's grown with consciousness. The standards have been lowered. So a person says, well, I had organic. You had white flour. Yes, it was organic, but it's a white flour sandwich. That cola is organic, but it's got modified fructose, or if it's sugar-free, it has aspartame, both of which are toxic. So that's all right. A guy came to see me this morning, very seriously ill. He says, how am I going to do? And I said, really bad. He said, how bad? I said, 10. He's what, 10 years? 10 hours? 10 what? I said, 9, 8. So I'm
giving up all the other bad stuff.
Good. I'm looking at context.
I wanted to get back to something Dr. Smith said. So you indicated that you sort of applaud the vegetarian movement. You think that the motives are good ones, and you said you yourself are not a vegetarian.
That's correct.
Is it because that you think there are other ways to promote these worthwhile goals that don't involve becoming a vegetarian? What's your thinking about that?
No, I think that there's lots of really important ethical issues that are connected with the way animals are raised in America today, the way they're processed. I think those are issues that are fair in discussion. I don't have any personal ethical issue with regard to eating meat or eating poultry or eating seafood. In order to live, something else must die. And people draw the lines at different places, and I just don't make that same, other than eating human beings, my array of things that I'm willing to eat is great. That said, I love fruits and vegetables. I much prefer it, and I think vegetarian food's gotten great lately. And my wife happens to be a vegetarian, and so therefore lots of my meals are vegetarian. But man, come down to it, a really nice steak on occasion is fantastic.
Not for the cow. Would you eat your dog or cat?
No, but I
Why
anthropomorphize
not?
my animals that are close to us. I don't anthropomorphize on cows. And so consequently, I don't have any problem with killing a cow. Now, I have a problem with the way cows are raised. I have a problem with the way the cows are killed, but not eating a cow, no.
But there are people who will eat any type of animal, including those that we consider pets. What is the difference in a person that says, I wouldn't kill this dog or cat because I have a bond with it. It knows when I'm needing something. It gives me unconditional love. It waits there all day for me. And I've raised cattle and heifers who have the same consciousness. Do you feel that you have any commitment to understanding the spiritual consequence of an act that deprives a loving creature of its life?
I think that all creatures have a consciousness, and therefore I do have deep respect for them. And I think amoeba have not a consciousness, but they have a right to live just like anything else. And I think plants have a right to live, but I can't live without them dying, and that's life.
But also, I mean, I think it's so hard to, where do you draw the line? You know, it's like going on a boat might kill fish or other, animals in the sea. Like, where do you draw the line? Like, riding a car, whether it's roadkill or not, at least there's tons of flies on the windshield. Like, I have a hard time, like, knowing where to draw the line with it and where it becomes, an ethical issue and not.
And that comes into play just anytime you prepare a meal for yourself, or even worse, go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Because you can sort of see a particular kind of food on your plate, but all the different things that went into preparing it.
But also, to grow a lot of vegetables, it takes pesticides that will also affect the ecosystem that way. So
I'm a certified organic farmer. I have a model farm. I teach people how to grow everything they need in an enormous variety, over 80 types of lettuce alone, without using pesticides. And when I did the research at the Institute of Biology of measuring the life force in foods and then comparing that to what we take in when we eat, I noticed this simply because I was affiliated, I was one of the members of the Trafalgar Hospital, which is no longer here, but used to be on the Upper East Side. And when they were giving hospital food to cancer patients, they didn't get well. So I said, it must be something in the way of something other than nutrients. Now, as a licensed dietitian, dietitians help contribute to disease because they give hospital food. 50,000 Americans died in 1 year from hospital food. 1 year. That was more than died, almost as many died in our entire 10 years in Vietnam, and we killed that many in 1 year from hospital food. So clearly there was something missing. And I found, this is the light part of the talk, and I found when I measured the vital life force of food, the raw foods, the juices, the fresher foods had a higher, on a scale of 1 to 10, higher value. Meat had 0. So therefore, when I created a diet and gave it to a series of rats, the rats that were given a living food diet, and that's what I believe the ideal vegetarian diet should be, living foods. That means you could cook foods providing you don't alter their nutritional value, like legumes and beans could be stored for 5,000 years. In fact, they've actually found legumes and beans in the Great Pyramids in jars, taken them out, germinated them, hydrolysis, and they came to life.
That's not true. It's just,
well, it is
it's
true.
just patently not true. There is no seed that will survive more than 35 to 70 years, period.
We have actual historical knowledge of seeds that have been taken out of vases and germinated.
It's still not true.
By your reality.
All right, okay, all right. So there's a disagreement
But
here.
anyhow, when I fed the rats the living food diet, they lived 22% longer than the other rats. And that told me that there was something missing from, and yet the rats got the same amount of protein, fats, carbohydrates, ash or fiber, and water. So what I found was, it was the energy. And I published these results in the Journal of Psychotronic Research, which showed that what we were lacking in our diet was energy, an exchange of energy. It's no different than if you're around a happy person, you feel different than if you're around a sad person. And how many times has someone said, "You're not, what's wrong?" And you say, "Nothing's wrong." They say, "No, I know something's wrong." Well, how do you know something's wrong? That's called intuition. No one's ever been able to document intuition. Yet ask any psychologist, therapist, psychiatrist, or physician, ask any caregiver, mother, do you use intuition and how does it work? Do you trust it? I believe in a life force. I believe that the only reason we're here is because of honoring that life force. The only thing that's going to be different in you when you die, or any of us, is the life force. The energy's gone. Everything else is there. And yet we never studied the life force, the very basis of life. So when I studied the seeds and the legumes and the nuts and the grains and either processed food or whole food in different combinations, I found that when you bring these together, it enhances the overall life force. And I've been able to work with terminally ill people my entire career. I just came from my health support group, and one of the gentlemen there has a reverse congestive heart failure on a lifestyle modification. Now, they could go in other cultures and have similar results. I have yet to see anyone do that on the standard American processed diet lifestyle regimens.
I have one disagree with what you're saying. The problem with this happy person thing. Happy people are enough to give me a heart attack, actually. They're so intimidating.
You must be related to him. Well, I would rather be around a happy person.
I'm being facetious.
I know, than a facetious person.
Ron, what do you think? What do you think of all this?
Well, what do I think of all? I think this is about kindness, and I think it's about removing judgment, and I think that one of the most famous vegetarians was Hitler, and
He wasn't a vegetarian.
Well,
that
he
was propaganda.
Okay, well, at least some
No, he wasn't,
some
nor were
language
the
or some
Nazis.
written documents was. I'm just saying that, look, my feeling is, you know, because you're drinking the soda or because you decided not to have or to have meat, you know, if I live my life for my own kindness, then hopefully that reflects out. And I guess what I find sometimes is that vegetarians can be very combative, and not that I don't, and not that I think that you are. Just because, you know, your pants are a little bit torn up, I'm just a little bit worried. You know that, but I'm
That
just
was a
saying.
meat eater.
You know, I'm just saying that, you know, it is about kindness. It is about removing judgment when you interact, whether you're interacting with food or with people. I think it's very similar. And so therefore, if eating meat you have in your mind, and it sounds like there is a real consciousness here, that it's acceptable, then I think that should be accepted. And
Then we
just-
should extend that to racism and anti-Semitism, which I would disagree with.
I
What about
don't.
the specific, I think the issue also is what are the specific benefits that Gary is alluding to, and you also allude to. Are those real?
you know, it does.
In other words, is he going to die from cancer or from heart disease because he likes a good steak once a month faster or sooner than somebody who's a vegetarian, who's a complete vegan?
So first off, if you look at the Okinawan diet and you look at the Okinawan study,
It has
which
fish in it, doesn't it?
the Okinawan
Yes.
diet does have fish.
Yes.
In it. If you look at that, and the Okinawans, just to give you an understanding, it's probably one of the greatest evidence looking at people that are over 100. It's a centenarian study that was done with a pretty large number of people. I think it's close to 1,000 people that are over 100. Looking at what their reasoning, why is it that they're living so long? Probably a third of it is related to genetics. So, you know, you got the genes, you got to learn how to fit into them better. I mean, that's the idea. So fitting into them better, I believe, is creating some sort of diet which is a calorie restrictive diet. If you look at what they really eat, it's that they just don't eat a lot. That they have a very calorie restricted diet, typically somewhere between 1,200 to 1,400 calories per day. You know, that's a Big Mac. I mean, so, you know, so it's, according to Western, then that's different. And it's also based on caloric density. And caloric density is essentially calories over the grams in weight. Give you an example. You have 100 grams of raisins. You know, sounds like it's good for you. It's high in iron, things like that. 100 grams of raisins is about 400 calories. You have about 100 grams of grapes, and it's about 60 calories. So the caloric density is 0.6. You could eat as much as you want of anything less than 1. And so vegetarians tend to have low caloric density, unless what we're speaking about with maybe the population that now is eating in pizza and potato chips, which is vegetarian but not good for you.
I agree with what he has said, and he's made some extremely valuable points, and I thank you for making those. I would add on to that my research around the world, and I spent 5 years traveling the world in search of what I call the real healers. And I found that the diet, if you had the perfect diet, I mean flawless, on a scale of 1 to 100, you're at 20 to 25%. If you have exercise, the right amount for you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you
If you have
just
a
said
longevity table of how long you're going to live
Yeah.
and how healthy you're going to live to get there, your diet, if it's perfect, is between 20 and 25% of the equation. Your exercise
okay.
and stress management are approximately 25%. Genetics is 3%. Every study, I have just finished a massive film. I've traveled all over the world. The Jains, the Orthodox Jews in Israel, the chief rabbi of Israel, all these of Ireland and other places, the Buddhists. I've looked at everything as far as vegetarianism. I have a major 800-page book coming out on vegetarianism where I break all this down. Genetics will allow you, if you're lucky, 4 years up or down. But then vegetarians do live 7 years longer. That's without supplementation. They never measured those who supplement. But even if you did everything right, you're at 50%. And yet when I travel around the world, you talk with an Okinawan, you talk with a family in Crete, you talk with a family in Greece, you talk with a family in the Western Mediterranean. They never talk about the Eastern Mediterranean. They're living long lives. More importantly, they're living longer lives because they're happy. The family unit is important. They honor some traditional values that have broken down in our own society. They don't rush. If you look in Okinawa, they're physically active all day long. The family unit's important. They have a way of living with patience. They also have a definition of their life. And there was a time in our society where people actually knew who they were. Ask the average person today, and they're frequently confused about who they are. And if you're confused about who you are, and you don't have the extended family support system, that's a challenge. And then, so I'm saying that's 50%. So 50% of the entire equation from what I have been able to discover, and I can be wrong and be subjective, and I never say that my belief is the belief. I would never advocate you not to be a meat eater. That's your right. My friends are meat eaters. I never question or challenge them. I'm merely giving a point of view because this is a discussion. But if we didn't have this discussion, I would never once say a thing about what you do with your life. That's your business. That's your right. That's yours. And you have to be ultimately responsible for that. I don't. If you ask me a question, I'd be happy to answer. But I don't push my belief on anyone. And I don't respect people who push their beliefs. And I believe absolutely it is correct. For too long, one of the reasons that more people weren't vegetarians because many vegetarians, like many of the other people, became almost cult-like in their admonitions towards others. They were impatient with others. They felt that they were better than others.
There has to... Okay, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Question, which I thought was a good question, and that is and I'm redefining your question, saying, is there any nutritional difference in terms of longevity and health and other things with comparing vegetarians broadly, and others? And there's several ways of dealing with this. One of the ways that Gary's dealt with it is by looking at different societies. And as you pointed out, that's fraught with problems, and the problems are that there are so many other things in society other than diet that makes it almost impossible to do comparisons without just saying diet is the main factor. In the United States, if you look at studies comparing vegetarians and non-vegetarians, and when you control for age, and when you control for social economic status, and when you control for a whole series of other things, there is no significant difference between the two groups. So it doesn't mean that it's not healthier, it's just that there's no scientific evidence that supports that.
No, but I think the other question is there one formula that fits all?
And the answer
I mean,
is
no, because I mean, obviously where I come from, Sweden, it's pretty long, cold winters. It makes it really hard to be vegetarian when the only thing you have your earth salad with carrots and potatoes. Like you will lack in nutrition. I mean, today it's different, but like if you go back 100 years, you have no way of getting all the nutrients in without eating actual animal proteins. And I think also, and if you look at Sweden, we have the second highest longevity after Japan, and we are very few vegetarians. But what I think is interesting is look at what fits you. And I think if we start listening to our bodies more than we do, we will actually discover what makes us good. And I do think that my diet should probably be a bit different from your diet and from your diet and from your, depending on where we come from and use. So
I answered it with reference to nutrition. There's huge environmental concerns on that, and I think those are fair too. And
I would absolutely.
Did you want to raise those?
Yeah, no, I think those are really important to talk about.
All right, I'll get the ball rolling on this. So there's obviously a major concern about the way we use our land. if you grow crops on a piece of land and then feed people with those crops, it's a much more efficient way of feeding people than to take those crops, put them in the mouths of livestock, and then feed people the livestock. So there's a land use concern. There's a concern about global warming because of cow farts. That's true. There's a concern about agricultural runoff in our streams. So there's sort of a whole host of concerns here, and a lot of people, at least that I've encountered, seem to be quite moved by that and take that to be a reason to be a vegetarian. Any thoughts on that?
So to what extent do cow farts compare with lots of other things like automobile exhaust and things like that in terms of global warming? I mean, is there a percentage that one can...
18% of all global warming is due to methane and animal production. To grow one potato organically is 90 gallons of water.
Right.
To grow 1 pound of meat is 3,200 gallons. No, excuse me. One burger is 3,200. 1 pound of meat is 12,000 gallons of water. When you consider that we have finite amounts of water, and that is not in dispute anywhere, when you realize that we're running out of water, and that's not in dispute, when you realize we may even end up with water wars, and we already have water conflict, then we should be as conservative in our use of water as possible. Also, every current study, and I have them all, shows that doing biodiverse agriculture, including using the French intensive methods, means that you will get more crop yield, hence more nutrient yield, from that land than you would if you grew livestock on it without the available pollution. And one of the reasons we had this great plume, I'm not talking about the plume from the dead zone from the oil that is leaking out. I'm talking about what was there before. I was just down there filming this year in New Orleans. And when you go over it, you see an area larger than the state of New Jersey that's called a dead zone, which means that any fish that goes in there will die. There's no oxygen. And why? Because of the artificial fertilizers that were used to grow mainly soybeans, genetically engineered, and corn, also for animals. And 90% of all soybeans in the United States go for animal. And now they're using ethanol, and ethanol is actually worse for the environment than and what it costs and what it does, and it takes land out of production to be used for food. So if you went organic, and if you went towards a plant-based diet, you would be substantially reducing the impact of global warming, more so than even cars, because no one realizes how many billions of animals are raised each year in the United States for human consumption. So on all other arguments aside, and people have the right to disagree, and we should, that's what makes our country great. We should come together, all of us, and realizing we have to do something individually on global warming. Planting trees, that's a great thing. Bushes and shrubs, anything it's going to hold, but going towards vegetable gardens or potatoes or wheat.
Don't you said something you said just now, that we all have to do something individually about global warming. Doesn't global warming strike you as the kind of problem where a sort of top-down imposed solution is going to be necessary?
Just the opposite. You will never. Unfortunately, I wished I could trust politicians. I don't. Because all the politicians who said they were going to do something didn't. I'd like to believe that our system is a fair and democratic system. It is not, from what I've seen. So if we're going to wait till some industry decides that they're going to clean up their act, or Congress is going to force them to clean up their act, or we're going to have standards, all we're going to do is have more dead zones and more lobbyists and more laws or loopholes. And I say, that's fine. I'm going to do what I can do as an individual.
I don't think that kind of pessimism is necessarily warranted. I mean, when we had a hole in the ozone layer, we came together as an international body and created the Montreal Protocol, and we fixed the problem.
You're saying we don't have an ozone hole? Oh,
yes,
we do.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Look at the latest statistics on depletion of the ozone as we speak. And if we were that interested, why didn't we affirm the Kyoto agreements? And why was this dog and pony show in Copenhagen recently that led to no environmental change? The only environmental change occurred in South America just last month, when people who decided to do something constructive, 8,000 people got together from around the world and decided, let's do something at the local level. I believe what Americans have not realized is how much power we have to make change as individuals and collectively together.
But again, even if every American sort of managed to find within themselves that kind of higher consciousness, our population is now dwarfed by the population of China. Anything we do here is practically insignificant now.
We use 28% of the world's energy. We're 2% of the world's population. I would say just the opposite. The entire world has taken an example of us. China has got a pollution problem today because it wants to create a standard of living equal to ours. India wants a standard of living equal to ours. 250 million people in China and 250 million people in India now have standards equal to us, which means they want the cars, they want the apartments, they want everything they want. We haven't given the best example, and I believe if we don't start doing something as groups without waiting till the best and brightest get around to doing it, and I believe that I'd rather do something than nothing. I believe anything we do, one act of kindness is better than no act of kindness, at least in my world.
May I ask something? One of the arguments I have heard, I mean, what you were saying you were doing in your farm, is it practical? Can the US and the rest of the world have what you are doing on your farm and still feed everybody?
In Africa, there was no carbon footprint measurable at all until just recently, because the people in Africa were able to live through sustainable means of honored tradition handed down through the millennium. It was only with monotheistic farming principles and through free market and privatization that people came in and says, in this area, you're now planting 200 different crops on 2 to 5 acres each, and you're sharing that with each other. Don't do that. We're going to give you a genetically engineered seed, and you're going to plant one crop. You're going to use these pesticides and buy these tractors, and you're going to use this amount of water, and that way you'll grow it once, and then you can do with the money. And they said, great idea, until such time that all those other people who were growing their products no longer had products grown, and now they went into debt, now they went into starvation, they moved off the farms, they moved into the city. Once again, the idea of the French fry. And my friend, you can look at India as the failed place in the world. They're farming water in India. People are drilling holes in their ground to get water and selling it rather than growing food because it gives them a quicker cash crop because they're depleted in water. And I'm suggesting that our complete farming industrial complex has failed humanity and created enormous problems, including malnutrition. We have plenty of resources to feed the world's population. Even as much population we have, we can feed people. And yet today, right now in the United States, as we speak, 17 million American children are going to go to bed hungry tonight. 17 million children. Now, I have a goddamn sense of compassion for children in America going to bed hungry, as I do in every other country in the world. And I am not going to stop, and I'm going to get in someone's face out there and show we don't have to have starving children in America. Ask school teachers how many times kids come to their class in the morning and don't even have enough food to keep conscious and focused. And the poor teacher, generous as they are, take money out of their own pocket. So when I look at American farms and what we used to do and what we used to be and how we used to feed everyone, how we had diversity, and we didn't have ocean pollution, we didn't have river pollution, we didn't have sky pollution, I have to ask, where did we go wrong? Because we thought we were smarter than what we were. And we thought we could do it in the new scientific way. And we threw everything else out the door. And you go to Africa, you go to India, and you ask now, what would you rather have, genetic engineering or something from your past?
I want to respond to your question. And as we sit here for an hour and a half or so, there will be about 2,000 people who die due to hunger. Most of those are dying in Africa, some in South America and some in South Asia, but the vast majority of them are sub-Saharan Africa. There is no solution to feeding the people in sub-Saharan Africa with known technology, even if the genetically modified food works, which is a real question, and there's no answer for that in sub-Saharan Africa.
It's politics causing those starvations, not a lack of food.
Well, I agree with that. The food distribution is fine. If you shifted to what I understand Gary's farm to be, would that feed America or feed the world? The answer is probably not. But that doesn't mean that he has the most efficient system that he has and that you couldn't modify that, or that we shouldn't modify the system that we have. So I think those are some of the issues.
So you're saying the argument that is presented that we need to raise the animals the way we do, and the chickens the way we do, and the vegetables the way we do, and all the pesticides that we use, that the argument presented that we have to do this because we are helping world hunger
It's not
is
true.
not true.
That's absolutely not true. Right now, America produces about 3,900 calories per person, and most of that's wasted. So you have a huge waste. It's not a question today of distribution. I mean, it's not a question of the amount of food production that we have. It's the amount of distribution. And I think I fully agree with Gary. It's the politics. If those kind
Yeah,
of
but those people are starving. That's the part that I've seen it. You know, I mean, what he's saying is true. Kids come to school hungry. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, so if world hunger isn't a justification for vegetarianism, what about, right, that's...
I was taking it to be a justification of the current system, not necessarily a justification for vegetarianism.
No, you were saying that that land use isn't the reason for world hunger, right?
Not today, that's absolutely
right. Okay.
In the future, maybe.
Now, what about the other environmental concerns?
I believe it's just the opposite. I can prove that land use is the reason for world hunger, but that's a separation of opinions we have.
Okay, so now what about this other environmental concern, namely pollution in our water supply and global warming?
I think they're great problems.
And is there a connection between animal agriculture and that?
Yeah, the question is how much does that produce versus other things. And I agree with Gary. I think we each need to do something. I gave up my car. I gave it up 15 years ago. It's been an inconvenience for me, but I think that is, to me, a major contributor to global warming and lots of the other environmental issues that you've raised.
That's a noble cause. I believe people should follow his example.
So, and if everybody else followed that example, we wouldn't have ethanol, and we wouldn't
Downstairs.
have, you can go on and on and on and on. And luckily, I live in New York, so the advantage is I got subway, so it doesn't.
Let me give one example of what he was saying.
We haven't heard from Nils in a long time. As a chef, is there anything you can do or your patrons can do to alleviate these environmental problems?
No, but I think there's a lot of things we can do, and I think, and I agree, every little step is important, and obviously what we do is, we're trying to support all local farmers, and I think it's important not only for the environmental aspects that food should be, grown in the right way, but also from a flavor standpoint, it's much better. It's simple as that, which actually is a good argument. That
when you say in the right way, can you be more specific?
No, but I mean without using an excess of pesticides where it's possible, and having best practices as a farm. On a farm, I think that will give you better food, and I think that's a good argument to get out to people, because there's something that is easy to understand and that will actually impact everyone. But then, as what we are trying to do is and the good thing is we're kind of a small school, so I can do a little bit what I want. But, I recently redid part of our culinary program where we actually teach about sustainability. We teach a big part about nutrition, and I think that's what's important. Like, we need to start educating people in what it means of using best practices, whether it is growing produce or raising animals for consumption. And I think that's how it has to change, and you actually have to prove to people how it will benefit them. And then, as I said, there's so many things we can do in New York. I mean, we're trying to, actually, with New York State, looking at how we can find rooftops to grow vegetables in the city so we don't have to go outside during seasons. And there's a lot of things we can do. And I think chefs are the one have a pretty big power there to change people's perception, especially in these days when chef tends to get a lot of publicity. And I hope that all chefs and the people in the food industry will use that in the right way. But that's saying, I think, I believe in using best practices and having balanced diets and everything. And I think that's something that we've been lacking for so long. There's no balance in whether it's our diet and other things in our life. And that's what I think we should strive for.
But if you are a consumer like me, and I go to buy tomatoes, or I go to buy eggplant, or I go to buy potatoes, how do I, unless I have a meter in my pocket that's going to pass over everything and says pesticide,
No.
or excessive this, how am I supposed to, and I don't have the place to grow my own vegetables, what am I supposed to do?
No, but here's another thing. It's not going to answer your question right away. But in New York we have the farmers market, right? With great products, but it's also extremely expensive. So for most people, it's not an option. And
is the farmers market without?
No, it's not enough to feed the city. But here's the
Is it without pesticides and things?
a lot of them are. Not all of them. But sorry.
I've seen people using.
Yeah, you can. But here's the crazy thing with it, right? There's so many farms upstate New York that have fairly good practices, and that during the summer, during the season, produces a lot of food, and we have really inexpensive tomatoes, inexpensive eggplants and everything, but it doesn't reach the market though. Those farms are actually dying, a lot of them, and those are the ones we need to support.
Why are they dying?
Because they can't find a way to get the food out to the big supermarkets. The small farmers that go to the farmers market, they can survive because they sell it at a really high price to people that can afford it. But all these like medium-sized farms upstate, they aren't getting the products out to the stores because the stores have either contracts in buying all their produce grown in California rather than getting it from upstate New York when they're in season. So there's a lot of things there I think we need to look at that can have a tremendous impact.
I'd like to address one of the issues that was raised, just to give a very practical example of why I have concern. And this is a real story, because when I travel all over the world. Let's just give an example of India. For centuries, people lived in relatively what they consider small village. They would still be larger than what we would consider that. But everyone had a plot of land, and everyone grew something. For example, cashews grow, big cashews. I don't know if any of you have ever been to India. The cashews are humongous in India. And then their neighbor would grow lentils, but there are a variety of lentils they sell that we don't have. If you went to 27th Street and Lexington Avenue, you go to Little India here, you'd see food we'd never see anywhere in any store, health food store, or regular store. But everybody grew something, and then they exchanged. There was a barter and exchange system. This is also true in Africa. It was true in Haiti. And Haiti used to grow so much rice, it actually exported rice. And then along comes the multinationals who first want to do two things simultaneously. They want to privatize, like in South America, they wanted to privatize in Bolivia, they wanted to privatize water. And they got it through. They paid the government an amount of money so they controlled all water. So much that if you had a well, you couldn't take water out of your own well. They made it illegal for you to collect rainwater. You had literally, until they went against the company and they took to the streets. Several people were killed by the soldiers, but that was the end of it. And they got rid of the company out in California that was Bechtel Corporation that was privatizing that. But now in comes the genetic engineered people, and they give a special type of rice or special type of wheat, but also they start taking over large plots of land. And now you have one crop grown, where before you had hundreds of crops, and all the people can't eat, and that crop is frequently exported. For example, at the height of the great crisis in the 70s and 80s in Bangladesh, they were exporting fish, but local people starving didn't have the money to buy it. So now when they go in, they take over the land in association with the government, frequently corrupt people, and the wealthiest, and now the farmer is no longer sustainable. And now they can't grow their plots. They're relegated to the outskirts. Then what they do, they leave the land and they go into the cities and they grow into the slum areas. This has happened in Mumbai, it happened in all the cities. It's happened in Africa too. And then in the case of Haiti, and this happened in Jamaica. I was there when this happened. You have thousands of, any of you from Haiti? Thousands of farms in Haiti, small farms, and they've got a very rich area, the middle of the island. And everybody grew everything, again, barter and exchange. And then in comes Bill Clinton, and with NAFTA, suddenly bananas came in cheaper than what they were growing them. Potatoes, cheaper. Every single item that they grew was brought in from the United States because it was subsidized cheaper. So now a person had a choice. Do I buy my local stuff? Do I buy that brought in? And they went for what was brought in because they could save money. As a result, all those farms went out of business. Even the dairy farms. In fact, the dairy farms that were in Haiti and providing local milk, the non-fat dry milk came in. So they brought it in big bags, they dump it in, they add water, they mix it up, now you get your milk, and it was 1/2 the price of the other dairies. All the dairies went out. And then the last vestige of self-sufficiency in food in South and Central America was stamped out by Chiquita and United Brands, and those others came in who owned the banana plantations and refused to increase wages. And then in Jamaica, it was one exception because it had been a colony of England. When England gave it its independence, it gave it a special treaty to be able to give the bananas to England. And Clinton says, no, that's unfair. So they sued and went to the World Trade Organization, and they can no longer sell their bananas to England at the same price. All the bananas are out of place.
I want to jump in here.
When you look at poverty, look at the real causes of poverty.
Oh, okay, thank you. We've been talking a lot about sort of agribusiness and the way that food is farmed intensively, and you've got pesticides and you've got lots of hormones and antibiotics being fed to livestock. And so I actually had a question for Dr. Stram, which is, so, I mean, you've said a couple of times already that there seem to be some benefits from vegetarianism. Is any of that due not so much to the avoidance of flesh itself, but due to the avoidance that all the stuff that comes along with it these days because of intensive agriculture?
Yeah, and I believe that's true. And one I'd like to just say, what I'm hearing here is it's about access, right? It's about access, one, to health care, good health, it's access to good food. And in terms of what I see is, especially, and unfortunately a big part of my population are cancer patients, and what you look at, if you look at recurrence rates in cancer patients, if you reduce their xenobiotic exposure, xenobiotic meaning those that are related to hormones, pesticides, it looks similar to like your own hormones. So hormone-related cancer seems to be related to people that have a higher pesticide rate in their diet, whether it's because of exposure, because they live near a farm, on a farm that does that, or because of what they eat. What we found is if you look at it in terms of just evidence and best practices, is that if you look at group populations that reduce their exposure and intake of pesticides, of hormones, growth hormones, whether it be from meat or other dairy or vegetables, they do better. Now, when you look at it in terms of a diet, it turns out that meat or things that are fat soluble hold pesticides and hormones longer, as opposed to fruits and vegetables. So that's where I would say, look, I understand it's really expensive, and it is. It's expensive for a lot of people to be able to afford good food. Limit your exposure to meat, dairy, that could have pesticides or hormones. So yes, I do find that that can be helpful in at least a secondary prevention of someone who has cancer.
But you would agree that one of the most important causes of inflammation, which can lead to cancer, and specifically colorectal cancer and breast cancer, absolutely on the hormones, but also heterocyclic amines and acrylamides.
Absolutely.
When you cook any animal protein to where most people would consider it edible, medium, well, you've created a cancer-causing, very pro-inflammatory cytokine reactor in the body. And that is now being shown in study after study after study after study. You go to the index.
Nils, are you teaching your students this?
No.
No? Is it true?
I don't know if it's true. I haven't read the research on it, so I can't, that's not one of my specialties. So I can't say. But there's one thing, another thing I would like to
But you don't
raise.
cook it, you don't like, you don't have well done meat in.
No, I would never. But another thing that's super quick, I think it's important to talk about, and I don't know the exact numbers, I'm pretty bad at remembering exact numbers, but if we look on how much we spent on food and how much we spent on housing 50 years ago, we used to spend somewhere like 30-40% on food and 10% of housing. And that has shifted. So we have less money to spend on food because we have to spend more on housing. So if you look at the problem that way, maybe if we can change that formula, maybe we can go back and
Yeah.
and
Americans spend less on food than any other group of people
Yeah.
in the world. And in one sense, that's good because we all have excess money, we can do other things with it. But in the other sense, it's bad because you get the food that you don't want to buy. So the question is, you need to pay more. If we're going to make it out of where we are, we're going to have to pay more. And you can pay more by going to a farmer's market, and you certainly get fresher food, more tasty food there, in my humble opinion. But you can also, there's lots of other programs. There's food cooperatives that are in the city now. You have farmers that are actually doing, you can buy a percentage of the produce of a given farm. You can go up and meet your farmer and talk with them.
They're very successful.
And they're very successful.
In our area, we keep trying to get them one of those, and we haven't been able because they're sold out.
Well, if they're a financial success, obviously this is a model that may draw in more
absolutely.
farms from a farther distance. And so I think there are solutions to it, but the solutions mean we're all going to have to pay more. And Americans so far have historically made the decision we want cheap food regardless of what the consequences are, whether they're for health or whether they're for environment or a whole series of
You're
others.
absolutely
Those are
right.
the choices that we make.
But that's a choice we have to. Would you rather buy something that took 3,100 miles to get to you, or something that took 20 miles to get to you, or 100 miles from upstate to get to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that's again, I'm fortunate enough to be able to make that choice myself, to pay more for food. But there's a lot of people that have the choice. They have the opportunity to make that choice.
I've heard this every time I start teaching the subject, and all I can do is say, yes, it's true. There are people who don't have money and can't make that. But if those of us who did have the money simply did it, it would make a huge change.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
But still, I would like to find
have
a way
everybody, right.
where you do both. I'm not saying that one excludes the other.
But understand what percentage we in this room are. 75% of all Americans live in the suburbs, and now you have what are called food deserts. In the ghettos, where you don't have farmers markets, you don't have the health food stores, you don't have the food co-ops, where people who are buying food are buying the worst possible food at the highest possible prices. A pound of potatoes costs you 63 cents. A pound of potato chips costs you $15. And no one ever thinks, gee whiz, if I'm on a limited budget, why don't I eat the healthiest food? Instead, you go into the places where people buy their food in these food deserts, in the inner cities, and they're getting the most concentrated calories, the most unhealthy foods at the highest prices.
So I think at this would be a good time, I think, to let the audience join in the discussion.
One said for full disclosure, Gary is 300 years old.
So if you have questions, please raise your hand. How am I still running this, or is
Yes, you're
Yes,
right.
you are.
so they can go to either microphone?
But identify
Ben,
yourself.
let's go.
We want to know who you are.
Come on, man.
Speak into the mic.
I'm being heard. Okay, my name's Ken, and I have a question, and I'd like to kind of direct it to Gary and Dr. Stram.
Stram, Ron. Just call me Ron.
I'm sorry.
I'm good with Ron.
I started eating a vegetarian diet back in the 70s, and the reason I did this was my son, and I was married at that time to an Australian woman. We were big meat eaters. I was raised in the meat eating family, and we brought in this big steak, and he was about 2 years old. He was so appalled he refused to eat meat, and so I converted over. And I've been eating a kind of a tofu vegetarian diet ever since. I weigh about 40 pounds less today than I did when I was in high school. I'm about 130 pounds. I'm never sick. I feel great. But recently, I have had a relationship with a lady who says I'm too thin. She not only says that, but because I eat so much tofu, and I'm a master tofu chef.
Change the name or the diet.
I got the mic. I have changed lately. But she says also because I eat so much tofu, she's told me that in tofu there's a female hormone, vegetable hormone, and this is somehow harming my sex drive. I'm not seeing her anymore. And I'm still eating tofu, but she did get me to eat a little more fish and cheese and stuff like that. So I'd like to, particularly from you, and you'd like to hear, should I eat a little more meat so I can...
Just get zinc in your diet. I think that'll help. Just to respond, soy is a really quite remarkable hormone modulator. It tends to be an estrogen hormone modulator. Modulators mean that if there's too little, it acts as, if there's too much, it acts as a competitive inhibitor. So soy actually does have some of that issues. Now, whether it's
what does it mean? It means that soy isn't good for sex drive?
Well, it means that it can add an estrogenic proponent to someone. So that's why there's this whole, controversy about women with breast cancer or women have the potential with breast cancer. You're told by, your doctors not to eat soy and don't eat soy because it's bad for you. Unfortunately, when you look at population studies that have a very rich amount of soy, and I will get to your question, they seem to have a lower rate of prostate and breast. So both, right? So in other words, it seems to modulate on a different level. It may modulate from not just estrogen, but DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone, which is one of the precursors for estrogen and testosterone. So I would say, you broke up with her, then you're good. But I would say that it's more likely that you just weren't attracted to her, and it had nothing to do with the soy. So that's what I would say. So, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean, but I would probably say it's unlikely that the soy had something to do with your sex drive.
So I should not eat those oysters?
I think you should eat oysters too, but that, that may be something else. That's an aphrodisiac, and, have a little chocolate with it and make, no, not together, but yeah, that's fine.
There's been, in my own clinical experience, I've seen probably the vast majority of vegetarians, or no matter what form of vegetarian they were, are suffering from a lack of muscle mass and vigor, and frequently libido. And that's because they did not have the variety. I'm not an advocate of too much soy, and yet when I've studied the Japanese and the Chinese culture historically, it's changing today. Soy products were a substantial part of the diet. It wasn't just an occasional amount of soy. It was almost daily, as green tea was daily. How do we know about green tea today? There are over 2,200 articles in the peer-reviewed literature on the benefits of green tea because of the Japanese and the Chinese using it. What I find you need in order to know your right body composition is muscle tense and not muscle tense, muscle dynamics. If you were to take an impedance test, it's an inexpensive test, it's non-invasive. It tells you what percentage of your body is fat, water, and lean muscle. And so you could be having too little muscle, and I find the best argument for more muscle and vigor and strength is exercise, resistance exercise. And what happens is when you take a good quality protein supplement with branched chain amino acids, and especially ribose, which is an energy enhancer to the overall system, you get an outstanding exercise in, and you actually expand the protoplasm of the cell. Then after, you're going to have more muscle, and muscle weighs more than fat. So people think, oh, I'm too fat, I'll go on this diet, and they lose muscle also because the body catabolizes both its nitrogen reserves, protein as well as fat when you lose weight. So if you're using your muscles, right, 45 minutes a day, 4 days a week, and you're taking a good quality supplement, you'll see that you'll gain probably about 10 pounds of muscle, but you'll look better and healthier, you'll be stronger. And we see that when we're lacking protein, it affects free testosterone. And in a man over the age of 35 to 40, free testosterone goes down. And if that goes down, there's more inclination towards depression, also loss of body muscle mass, along with human growth hormone. So exercise helps with human growth hormone. Exercise keeps all your muscles strong, but actually keeps your weight up, but it's good weight. It's like a football player weighs 200 pounds, then goes, stops playing football, and now it's 200 pounds of fat, a lot of fat. So do that and watch your vigor come back up.
I exercise every day. I'm a swimmer, so I've been doing this for 40 years.
But that's good aerobic. That's great for your lungs. But I'm talking about real resistance exercise.
Weights. Free weights.
Did you want to jump in?
You didn't ask me,
here?
but I'll respond. I want to agree with Gary, but from a totally different perspective. If you look at the scientific literature on nutrition, with a few obvious exceptions, we don't know much about what humans really need. So the literature out there is fraught with problems of one sort or another, and if you look at it, it's a disaster. So that said, I think it's safe to say you really need to eat a variety of foods, the maximum variety that you possibly can would be of what's the best advice for anybody. Whether you're a vegetarian, fine, eat as many different types of fruits and vegetables and whole grains as you can.
Is there another question from the audience?
Yes,
You go ahead, please.
But you were.
That's okay.
I'm in the midst of developing some programming on public television based on this book called Kaizen, which is the idea of steady, constant improvement by taking small, steady steps. Just saying things like, great change is made through small steps, ask small questions, think small thoughts, take small actions, small problems. It circumvents the brain's natural resistance to creative change. And also when you notice the small detail, that's exactly what leads to innovation. And taking a small thing that people have been talking about today with food, to the best of my knowledge, when Eleanor Roosevelt said people could make a donation to the war effort during World War II by planting victory gardens, 40% of all the vegetables grown and consumed in this country during those years were produced out of people's little gardens. And it was done 40 years back then under conditions far worse than anything we're dealing with now. It's already been done. The Japanese economic miracle based on these same ideas. So I was wondering, when you hear something like Kaizen, they're telling people that their small efforts matter. And it's been proven before. This is how this country got out of the Depression. 15 million people left the workforce during World War II. Greatest in military, manufacturing development, Rosie the Riveter, greatest quality control, but by telling individual people their individual efforts matter, and the world works by taking small little steps, not huge, gigantic, mega. Gary Null, who has attested to that very well. I'm just curious, when you hear about this, what does it mean to you?
Oh, me?
Anybody.
Well, that's my entire principle of living. I believe that everything starts with the individual deciding what can they do, what tools do they need, and doing it incrementally. I train people to do the New York City Marathon. And they'll come and they'll be overweight, and the first day they'll do 100 yards, and they're panting, and they say, I can't do this. I say, not today, but you will finish the marathon. 23,000 people I've helped finish the marathon. I believe that we must take small steps, which is one of the reasons that I believe that if we do anything, simple things, just what you buy, don't buy more than what you need. Lower your footprint, your actual footprint. I don't have a telephone in my house. I don't have an internet in my house. All right? I walk as many places as I can. Now that might not seem like a big deal, but until you start realizing what happens. I try to help one homeless person every day. Every day, 7 days a week, I find a homeless person, and I do what I can for them. even if I'm not here. In Denver last week, there was a homeless man, and I talked with him for about an hour. I went to do a PBS show. I invited him to come, and he got some work because of that. He had been sleeping under a bridge for 6 months. He used to work at a bank. Next week, I'm filming my new documentary is on the new homeless in America. There are 100 million people at the poverty level, slightly above or slightly below. You don't hear about them, you don't see them. It's as if they're invisible. These are not the tea bag party. These are people that you don't see out there. So anytime we can do anything to make someone else aware we care about them, and we extend ourselves, and we are conscious, and even getting healthy. I've never told anybody go on any radical program. It's not going to work. They're not going to do it. That's not how we're hardwired. So I simply suggest to people, if you want to get healthy, take one bad thing or one thing you want to get eliminated, and each month get rid of one thing. That's doable. Like you want to give up coffee, this month give up coffee. Next month give up processed sugar. Next month give up refined carbohydrate. Next month start exercising. At the end of the year, you've achieved a lot. It's the small incremental changes that make a difference. I would agree with that philosophy.
I want to take a bit of a contrarian view on the question that was just asked. And I guess it's getting back to this disagreement we were having earlier about the relative importance of individual action versus sort of top-down.
Keynesian.
What was that?
Keynesian.
Fair enough. I was just about to talk a little economics, so yes, let's talk about that. I mean, we're talking about vegetarianism, and as we've said today, one of the problems with meat eating are the environmental effects. Now, the thing about environmental effects of human activity is that typically the human who engages in that activity doesn't pay the full cost of it. Right? It's an externality. The pollution that goes into the air, the runoff into the streams. These are not costs. These costs get shouldered by other people or future people. And who's gonna? So now, if you happen to have an enlightened soul, then maybe you'll just see this and you'll change your behavior. On the other hand, we have a lot to worry about these days, and maybe this isn't the first thing on your mind. However, if government would step in and force us to pay the costs of our behavior, then I think we could see some real progress on environmental issues. And this is not, so I don't mean to exclude the importance of individual behavior, but I do want to emphasize the importance of governmental behavior.
We have another question to it.
I'm not vegan, but I'm vegetarian. I've been for a couple decades now. And yet I can't say I'm totally clear all the time about my feelings about it or the ramifications of it. Is it effective, and why am I still doing it? And so just to address one of those questions, did I hear a contradiction between, yes, there are health benefits, less cancer, less Alzheimer's, and what you said, vegetarians do not live longer in studies that have been done in the United States?
No, I'm saying within societies, if you compare vegetarians and non-vegetarians, and you control for all sorts of other things, like education, like social economic status, like male and female, like age, and sorts of, the scientific literature says there is no significant difference between health benefits of vegetarian and non-vegetarian.
We share a difference of opinion. I have 400 studies from Loma Linda University Medical School showing that there is a difference. But again, we're here to share a difference of opinion.
I mean, I think the difficulty in those type of studies, any kind of study that isn't a drug type study where you give a drug and you try to look for an effect, there are so many variables in eating patterns, in diet, in exercise, in what people say they do, they don't do, stress levels that may have significant impact that are really not seen. But again, I think if you do look at certain societies and you do look at people that have vegetarian-like activities or habits, they tend to have lower rates of what we spoke about. If you look at Western society, it's a little bit more trickier, and that, I think, is because of the confounding of other variables, even if you try to control them. And honestly, and that's why integrative medicine or holistic practices is a very difficult medicine to say why it's better, right? Because it's hard to do that because you have to do outcome studies, and how do you do outcome studies on prevention? And that's another realm.
But
I think if it feels better, and you feel better by doing it, then I think that's a really good reason to do it. Most people feel better on a vegetarian diet that is physically better.
Yeah, but I mean, I think also, just because I'm vegetarian doesn't mean you eat healthy. And I think that's where you know, you need to educate people.
Absolutely.
Because, as you said, you can eat pizza all day and it's vegetarian because you don't put pepperoni, doesn't mean you're eating healthy.
Right.
Yeah, I've got a question here. You should
Make it a little more complicated.
Come up to the mic. You know, but we need it because we broadcast. Yeah, we can't hear you. Yeah, you got to come up.
I could repeat it into the microphone if you want me.
Oh yeah, at least you didn't break it like me.
You broke it.
Yeah.
Okay, you trumped me. I have two. My name is Joyce. I have to give you my last name? Okay. All right, I'll read. I have a few questions. First of all, what I've been hearing today is, a lot of controversy, and a lot of people are interested in their own survival. I want to live to 100. Then there's a really bigger issue of who's, of what Gary brought up, and which I feel very strongly about, that that the diet that people are getting fat. Like I was watching the program about the Chinese getting really fat now. And I happen to work part-time at a city university, which is touted as the most diverse university of all the cultures. And so I talked to a lot of people from different cultures, from Bangladesh, from India, from China, from Dominican Republic, and every single one of these kids said this, and it was very moving to me, that when they were in their own countries, they ate better. That coming here to the college, it's Baruch College, so it's a business school, every one of them said they gained weight, were much sicker than they ever were in their own countries. And this is, over the last 5 years. The second thing that impressed me the most was I was on the committee to change the food in the cafeteria, because I belong to Slow Food, if you know the organization. And it really works at, training people and teaching people as to what to eat.
They're the ones who started at Yale, right?
Pardon?
The slow food.
In Italy.
The slow food movement in Italy. Okay,
it was an Italian movement. Less than just like enjoying the food at the table and enjoying people.
Okay, because I thought you meant there was a movement in the cafeteria food of colleges, which started at Yale College.
No, this was just just a few people that worked there that said, look what the kids are eating. They're eating these greasy, called spicy fries. So they, everybody had that. It was ubiquitous. Everywhere I went, that's what the kids were eating, whether they were black or white or Chinese, whatever. That was the most popular food. So we put in a grain diet, a grain bar, last maybe 2-3 years ago. And I noticed at the beginning the kids started to eat more grains. And over the period of 3 years, people seemed to change their desires. So my question is twofold. First of all, I wonder, is liking vegetables genetic in some way? I grew up in a family where my sister would eat raw chopped meat, and I was repulsed by this.
That's probably not a bad thing.
And my father liked hot, spicy food, and so do I. So, genetically, the French diet, the concept that the French, I lived in France, the French women, I noticed they ate a lot of sugar and black coffee and wine, and yet they were very thin. Cheese and stuff. So my question is, do different body types, where you come from, you're talking about Okinawa, I think I have a natural vegetarian desire. I was always repulsed by seeing, animals cut up. It was just something that happened when I was 3 or 4 or 5 years old. But A, are some people just born for vegetarianism? And B, does everybody think that maybe, training people to like vegetables and like at an earlier age, which is what slow food is doing, gardens in Bed-Stuy, that kids could develop a better eating habit and then teach their parents how to eat better.
So if I can, I'll try to answer if I can. Basically, the food that's made now, like spicy fries or French fries, it's very addictive. It's sugar, fat, and salt. If you put them all together, it has the addictive qualities as cocaine, heroin. So you desire that type of taste. So one, it takes time to reduce that addiction, to bring someone back into appreciating the taste of vegetables and fruit if you have such a dramatic taste. So one, I think that's true. If you look at individuals within populations, there are individual preferences. The Dalai Lama eats meat because he found that if he didn't eat meat, he got sick. And it's probably because he wasn't able to digest from vegetable sources. Iron, which is typically a non-heme iron, so it's harder to digest. He may have not had enough vitamin C to help with that digestion. So we are different because of our digestibility. Now, if we change our digestibility because we add good foods, probiotics, prebiotics, then maybe we would be more likely to be able to adapt to a slow food diet, to a vegetarian diet, to a Mediterranean diet. I think that, again, the accessibility is, it's much more accessible to get the spicy fries. And even though it may cost $15 to get the bag, you've got 30,000 calories worth of energy. It's not great energy, but it's energy. An apple has 60. It's hard to work your whole day on an apple that costs the same as a bag of potato chips. So I think in society, we do have to change how we do that, and that comes from the top down. That comes from regulations, not allowing subsidies to go to the corn, soy, cotton. That's what we need. Wheat. I mean, I do think that ground-up movement is how you change top-down movement.
Could I add something on to what you're saying? And I value your opinion on this because those are absolutely, he hit the bullseye. In 1976, there was a group of women in Boston, a small group, who were noticing the ads on television were all for processed foods on Saturday morning for children. And they started a group. Now it's a famous group, and it led to raising consciousness.
What's the group? What's it called?
It was the Boston Women's Health Collective. But if you take a look at television advertisements, almost all the food on Saturday morning for children is junk food. And that's not in dispute. It's high-processed, junky food.
Absolutely.
And yet, here's what you have. You have a lack of consciousness or ethics on the part of the television industry, who have no problem showing an ad. You have no problem for the people manufacturing, no problem for the people who help create the ads to make people, little kids especially, want that. You go into a supermarket, the kids are going to yell, "I want that." Mother says, "No, that's not healthy for you." Doesn't matter what that food is. The mother wants to give them something, and that's going to displace. It's the displacement factor.
Right.
Even if you had, let's say you had organic meat, you had organic vegetables, you had a meal for someone that would provide the good nutrition the kid needs, but the kid wants the junk food, that's displacing something that would be good. Now you have an epidemic in the United States today. I just premiered last weekend, 1 week today, my new film on diabetes. We have an epidemic of childhood adult diabetes, type 2 diabetes in children. We've never had that in American history.
Right. Never saw it.
Diabetes 1, yes.
Right.
Why? Because we have an epidemic of obese children, toddlers, even babies, teenagers. We have 1/3 of the entire adult American population overweight, and many of those morbidly so. We're fatter per population than any other country in the world. When you're overweight, that leads to other diseases, heart disease, high blood pressure. So many of the diseases we're talking about are conditioned. So it's hard to break a condition. Sweet and soft, crunchy and salty. So we have to have the parents the school teachers, everyone become aware that if the child doesn't start eating right at some point, they're going to end up with diseases that they would never have expected in any previous generation that they would have gotten later in life. Arthritis in 16-year-olds, there's a new study on that. And you shouldn't have arthritis and adult diabetes and heart disease in a 10-year-old kid. You do, and not in a few. So until such time that we ask, who's going to be responsible? Are the networks? No. Is the government? FTC? No. Are the congressional oversight committees? No. Then who are we left with? We're left with we. You've all heard of Senator... I'm sorry.
I think Andrew wanted to jump in and say something.
A number of different comments. A number of other countries have outlawed junk food being advertised on children's television, and they've had tremendous success with at least doing that. Other states now have eliminated junk food from school systems, and other countries are considering doing something like that. You have, in some cities in America, you are outlawing fast food establishments within a mile of the school. So you've begun to take a lot of steps, and I think that they're good steps. Are they enough? Of course not, but they're at least starts. My deepest worry is if you ask children about nutrition, or if you watch their behavior, they go for the salt, they go for the sweet, they go. In New York, for instance, it's required that every single student take one thing from each of the things. So if there's an apple being served there, every single student must take an apple. If you then go out, which I have done, and turn over the trash can and look at what's happened, I can tell you the apples are in there. So what we don't have is an education system that tells students about food, about nutrition, and about the best practices. And I think that's absolutely serious. If we don't put that into the school systems, we're going to have a serious thing. The governor of the state of New York, whatever you may think of him, has recommended a tax on soda. Other states have recommended tax on fast food and on junk food. And all I can do is say, he wants to do it in order to take care of the deficit from the state. I'd like to do that and use that money for education purposes, or to help pay for obesity, which is going to be paid out of each of our taxes simply due to the healthcare system that we have. So I think that there are lots of good things that are happening. More needs to be done, but I think you can approach that from a lot of different ways. And
right on.
Yes, but
right on.
just a super quick comment though. The problem why we don't eat apples and stuff is because the apples we have are pretty bad. You know, we used to have great apples. New York, the great apple state, but now we're getting, pretty crappy apples from Washington State.
But even the bad...
they're good.
Even the bad apples are good for you.
No, but they're good for you. But if they tasted better, they would probably be more prone to eat them as well.
I would suspect, I hate to say it, I would suspect that even if you got apples in season and you got the good apples and you gave them to students, I suspect the students wouldn't take that.
No, I wouldn't agree actually, because a good apple in season tastes as good as any candy. But
not if you're hooked on salt. If you're hooked on sugar,
but that's what I say. If you're going to get away from being hooked on that, you need to have an alternative that is better, like that's going to taste good. So
I think we need chefs in school cafeterias.
We did actually just adopt a public school in the city that we're going to work with.
And I think that's wonderful.
And I think that's an important issue because it also shows that the earlier you educate kids, and the better eaters they're going to be, the more healthy they're going to eat. Right. And I think that's where we should use our knowledge to help out, and that's why this whole big
Alice Stewart is doing that. She is a real hero, in my opinion, for all of the...
Alice Waters.
I'm sorry, Alice Waters, for educating in the schools by showing how tasty, delicious, and nutritious food can be, even locally grown food. She is just, I think she's an American treasure.
We have time for one more question, sorry.
My name is Barbara Jacobs, and I do agree that nutrition should be taught at a very early age. I treat food like medicine. I have taught my daughter to treat food like medicine. My daughter has trained her daughter. My daughter got so into it, as a matter of fact. She went to Columbia University. She is now a board-certified nutritionist. Doesn't practice, but did it for her own general knowledge because she wants to bring up her daughter in the best way possible. My granddaughter is now 13 years old, has the most beautiful body in this whole world. Never overweight, never underweight, just perfect. A great mind.
Yeah, she is your grandchild, by the way.
We know that. But when she's with her friends and they say, oh, just cheat a little bit, you can eat a little bit of this, she says, no, because I'll only be cheating myself. So I do believe education starts at home, and that's when all these diseases can be different.
We don't want to be too utopian.
Appleton, Wisconsin.
We don't want to be too
If you want to just Google Appleton, Wisconsin, it's a school system that adapted a vegetarian-like diet for their children. Appleton, Wisconsin. Their grades in math and English went up. Their truancy went down. It's rather remarkable. It was done actually in the late 90s. This is what needs to be adopted throughout, and it showed. I mean, it works, and it works. But look it up. And it
even happened in the prison system. Dr. Alexander Schaus, Dr. Scholenthaler, and Barbara Reed got the sugar and the dairy out of prisons, and the fighting and the violence went substantially down. And they did this time and again. American diet.
Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.